The most profound realization a person can have is that they're living a borrowed life, a life constructed from the expectations, fears, and unmet desires of others. We often reach a critical juncture, sometimes in quiet anxiety, sometimes in roaring crisis, where we must confront a simple yet devastating question. Am I living my own life or merely enacting a role written for me by the world? The cost of delaying the choice of self is immeasurable. Carl Jung, in his exploration of the depths of the psyche, illuminated the fact that the greatest suffering is not born of a lack of resources, but of a lack of soul. It is the existential ache of the unlived life. For decades, we engage in a silent, personal cost-benefit analysis. We believe that by consistently sacrificing our own deep-seated needs, our genuine passions, and our authentic voice, we will secure the invaluable currency of belonging, security, and acceptance. We become psychological chameleons, masters of adaptation, constantly adjusting our light and shadow to please the prevailing social climate. This behavioral pattern, though seemingly protective, is a slow poison to the soul. It creates an ever-widening chasm between the person we present to the world and the person we truly are. This disparity is the foundation of neurosis. It is the soul's protest against its own imprisonment. The choice to finally prioritize yourself, to choose the truth of your interior landscape above the comfort of external approval, is not merely an option. It is the prerequisite for psychological survival. The function and pathology of the persona. To understand the immense undertaking of choosing oneself, we must first understand the social mask we wear, the persona. Jung described the persona as a compromise, a complex system of adaptation that exists between the individual and society. It is the public face, the professional identity, the social role. The persona is fundamentally necessary. Without it, we would be incapable of functioning in the world. We would lack the necessary social lubrication. However, its necessity is also its greatest danger. The problem arises when the individual mistakes their mask for their substance, when they begin to believe that they are their title, their accomplishments, or their carefully cultivated image. This confusion leads to a psychological inflation where the ego identifies exclusively with the persona. The person becomes hollowed out, their feelings become scripted, their opinions derivative, and their life choices dictated by the fear of losing the approval that sustains the mask. Think of the successful executive whose life unravels after retirement because the loss of the title reveals the vacancy beneath it. The external structure collapses, and there's nothing authentic left to stand on. The energy that should be fueling creativity and inner growth is instead diverted entirely to maintaining the facade. The decisive act of choosing oneself is therefore the conscious and painful stripping away of the persona. It is a psychological death, the death of the person others expected you to be. It is a temporary retreat from the superficiality of the collective mind to rediscover the unique substance of the individual. The ethical imperative of individuation. The process that follows the collapse of the persona is what Jung called individuation. This concept is the central pillar of his entire body of work, and it is frequently misunderstood. Individuation is not the shallow pursuit of individualism, which is often simply an ego-driven desire to be different or superior. Instead, individuation is the process by which an individual becomes a self, a distinct, integrated, indivisible unity. The goal is not to become perfect, but to become whole. It is the task of differentiating the individual from the general or collective psychology. This process is inherently ethical because an unindividuated person is merely a pawn of the collective. Their values are not chosen, but absorbed. Their actions are driven by consensus or mass hysteria. The individuated person, having done the inner work, possesses a stable moral center and can stand against the tide of collective insanity. Individuation is a path of transformation, a difficult process of psychological and spiritual maturation where all the content of the personal and collective unconscious is brought into the light of consciousness. It is a pilgrimage inward to integrate the full spectrum of one's being, accepting the light and, most importantly, integrating the darkness. It is an acknowledgement that to truly find yourself, you must be willing to lose yourself in the confusion and chaos of the unknown parts of your own psyche. The crux, the integration of the shadow. The most challenging and necessary stage of choosing oneself is the confrontation with the shadow. The shadow is not simply the concept of evil. It is the everything that the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge about itself. It contains our inferior traits, our primitive desires, our repressed aggressions, and our socially unacceptable urges. Ironically, it also contains positive qualities, natural, creative impulses that the ego found too threatening or too unconventional to integrate early in life. We spend enormous energy maintaining the barrier between our ego and our shadow. When this energy is no longer sufficient, the shadow does not disappear. It projects. We see our own denied flaws and undesirable traits in others. The coworker you intensely dislike, the public figure whose habits trigger disproportionate rage. These are often screens onto which you are projecting your own unacknowledged shadow. The decision to choose yourself is the decision to cease this projection and own your psychic reality. It is a moment of profound moral and psychological courage, where you look squarely at the darkness within and say, "This, too, is me." This integration is critical. As Jung asserted, only by incorporating the darkness can one achieve a robust, well-rooted conscious personality. The energy bound up in repressing the shadow is released and becomes available for creative life. The failure to integrate the shadow is the reason people sabotage their own success, succumb to addictive behaviors, or experience sudden, inexplicable outbursts. The shadow, when ignored, becomes a saboteur, waiting to emerge at the most inopportune moment. Choosing yourself means turning to face this difficult reality, inviting the rejected parts to the negotiating table, and creating a new, inclusive self-definition. The internal compass, listening to the unconscious. Once the work of integrating the persona and the shadow is underway, the psyche gains a new communication channel, the voice of the unconscious. This voice is heard not through logic, but through the language of symbol and feeling, through intuition, dreams, and sudden, inexplicable moments of insight. When you prioritize yourself, you begin to treat these internal signals as reliable data, as the essential guidance system they were meant to be. The unlived life is characterized by ignoring the quiet discomfort, the faint warning signal, the intuitive no that precedes a terrible decision. The individuated life is one where you learn to trust the wisdom of the body and the messages of the inner self. Dreams, in particular, become an invaluable guide. They offer a compensatory function, presenting aspects of your reality that the conscious ego has overlooked or suppressed. Active imagination, the technique of deliberately entering a dialogue with the figures and symbols that emerge from the unconscious, becomes a tool for integrating fragmented parts of the personality. This requires a stillness and a solitude that the noise of the external world constantly seeks to obliterate. The choice of self is, in part, the choice of profound listening. Synchronicity and the aligned life. The ultimate and most rewarding consequence of choosing oneself is the experience of synchronicity. Jung defined synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence, an acausal connecting principle. It is not mere chance. It is the simultaneous occurrence of a certain psychic state with an objective event that corresponds to the psychic state. When you align your inner life with your truest self, when your intentions are pure and your psychological structures are integrated, the world around you seems to respond in kind. You stop forcing outcomes and instead become a magnet for the necessary circumstances. The book you need to read appears on a random shelf. The person who holds the key to your next step calls out of the blue. Or the specific resource required manifests at the perfect moment. This phenomenon is the objective validation that your internal and external realities are finally harmonized. It offers tangible proof that the universe operates not just through cause and effect, but also through meaningful pattern. The experience of synchronicity is deeply reassuring. It confirms that you are moving in the right direction, that the difficult and lonely path of self-discovery is in fact the path toward true belonging in the cosmos. The responsibility and freedom of self-possession. The journey of choosing yourself is not completed in a single decision, but in 1,000 daily acts of discipline and courage. It is a commitment to the process of becoming. The final result of this long and arduous work is not an escape from suffering. Suffering is inherent to the human condition, but the profound liberation of knowing that the suffering you endure is your own. It is the pain of growth, not the pain of self-betrayal. The person who has chosen themselves and successfully navigated the process of individuation becomes a source of light and stability for the community. They do not demand anything of others because they are already complete within themselves. Their relationships are characterized by true reciprocity, and their actions are driven by authentic conviction, not by obligation or the fear of rejection. To choose yourself, then, is the greatest ethical act, because the healed and integrated individual is the only one capable of truly contributing to the healing of the world. It is the only true way to become the master of your own destiny, transforming yourself from a puppet of the unconscious or the collective into a conscious agent of creation. The responsibility is heavy, but the freedom it purchases is absolute and eternal. Choose yourself and watch your true life begin.